2257, Earth, once vibrant and lush, has become a barren wasteland, scorched by climate catastrophe and irreparably poisoned by centuries of exploitation. Humanity's survival depended on an unprecedented gamble, the colonization of Venus. While its surface was a molten hellscape, its dense atmosphere harbored a potential salvation, a thin band of habitable space nestled in the planet's clouds. Here, humanity constructed towering marvels, floating cities anchored by advanced aerostatic systems. These aerial utopias, shimmering with futuristic splendor, were a testament to resilience and ingenuity. Life was harsh but possible, tethered to technological brilliance and the delicate balance of the cloudscape. But as humanity thrived, their existence teetered on the precipice of a looming, unspoken dread. Venus's atmosphere was alive with violent tempests, storms so colossal they dwarfed Earth's hurricanes. Every inhabitant knew the risks. And now, as a storm unlike any other gathered on the horizon, the fragility of their world was about to be exposed. Above the roiling clouds, questions lingered. What had humanity overlooked in their eagerness to survive? And was Venus truly just a new home, or something far more enigmatic? The storm began as a distant anomaly, a faint distortion on Venus's horizon. At first, it was dismissed as another routine tempest, the kind their technology was designed to withstand. But as the hours passed, the anomaly grew, consuming the skies with ominous speed. The city's meteorological systems, tuned to detect even the slightest fluctuations, began to fail. Data became erratic, and what little information they had painted a dire picture. This was no ordinary storm. Suspended nearly 50 kilometers above Venus's surface, the cities floated on the delicate interplay of air pressure and gravity. A disruption of this scale was a threat not only to their structures, but to the very concept of survival in the clouds. Panic began to ripple through the population. Emergency protocols were activated, and evacuation drills filled the sleek corridors with an undercurrent of dread. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was something unusual, a pattern in the storm's movement that defied natural laws. It seemed to shift and adapt, almost as if it were alive. What was once merely a meteorological threat now carried the weight of a deeper mystery. Was the storm just an atmospheric phenomenon, or was it driven by something sentient, something aware? As the tempest surged closer, its effects began to ripple through the floating cities. Power grids faltered, and the once reliable anti-gravity systems began to flicker. The thin line between survival and oblivion grew thinner still. For those who watched from the observation decks, the storm was not merely a force of nature. It was a harbinger of something they could not yet comprehend. And then, at the heart of the storm, something shimmered. A structure, or perhaps a signal. Whatever it was, it wasn't human. The question loomed larger than the storm itself. Had humanity stumbled into the domain of another intelligence? As the storm engulfed the edges of the city, researchers scrambled to decode the strange signal emanating from its heart. What at first appeared as a burst of chaotic noise soon revealed an intricate structure. A repeating pattern embedded within the turbulence. It was unmistakable. This was no random natural occurrence. The storm was broadcasting. Inside the city's central research hub, Dr. Amina Valdez, an expert in atmospheric phenomena, led the effort to understand the signal. She and her team had long speculated that Venus, despite its hostile environment, might harbor unknown forms of life. But a storm, transmitting encoded information, was beyond even their wildest theories. The discovery ignited a fierce debate among the city's leaders. Should they investigate further, risking the city's limited resources? Or was this signal a trap, luring humanity into a confrontation it couldn't win? The signal's message grew clearer as the team worked, revealing a structure buried deep within the planet's atmosphere. It appeared to be ancient, far older than any trace of humanity's presence on Venus. Amina speculated that it could be a relic of an advanced civilization, perhaps one that had adapted to Venus's extreme environment long before humans had arrived. But the revelation raised an unsettling possibility. Had this civilization perished in the very storms that now threatened humanity? Or was the storm itself their legacy, a sentinel guarding a forbidden secret? As these questions lingered, the storm's intensity escalated, hammering the city's defenses. Some residents demanded immediate evacuation, fearing annihilation, while others saw the storm and its message as a potential lifeline, a way to understand their new home and secure their survival. For Amina, the choice was clear. If humanity had any hope of coexisting with Venus, they needed to uncover the truth about the signal. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that they were trespassers, prying into something they had no right to disturb. As the research team prepared a probe to investigate the signal's source, an eerie calm settled over the city. The storm, almost sentient in its movements, seemed to hesitate, as though waiting for their next move. Was it granting them a reprieve, or was it merely the eye of the tempest, a brief pause before the final onslaught? The probe launched into the storm, vanishing into its chaotic depths. Every eye in the research hub was glued to the screens, watching as data streamed in, painting a picture of Venus's secret history. And then, just as abruptly as it had begun, the data feed cut off. What had the probe seen, and why had the storm suddenly shifted, now targeting the city's core? The probe's silence was deafening. For hours, the research hub was shrouded in tension, its occupants waiting for a signal, a fragment of data, anything, to explain what had happened. But all they received was an eerie quiet from the storm. Meanwhile, its intensity surged, battering the city with winds so fierce they threatened to dismantle the floating platforms holding everything aloft. Amina and her team scoured the partial data transmitted before the probe went dark. Among the fragments were images of immense, geometric structures suspended within the storm, impossible constructs that seemed to pulse with a faint energy. They weren't natural formations, they were deliberate. These structures defied known physics, their design suggesting a purpose that humanity couldn't yet grasp. And buried within the probe's final transmission was an unsettling detail, a series of symbols carved into the surface of the structures, eerily similar to an ancient Earth script. The revelation sent shockwaves through the city's leadership. If these symbols were connected to Earth, how? And, more critically, why were they on Venus? Amina posited a theory that sent chills through the room. What if humanity's escape to Venus hadn't been by chance? What if they had been led here, their arrival anticipated? As the storm closed in, power across the city began to fail. Gravity systems flickered, and the platforms shuddered. The storm was no longer just a threat. It had become an active force, pressing against the barriers that kept humanity aloft. With each passing moment, the question became more urgent. Was the storm sentient, or was it being controlled by something within those ancient structures? Aboard the city's central command platform, desperation mounted. Evacuation plans were hastily drawn, but resources were limited. There were simply too many lives to save and not enough vessels to carry them. Some factions argued to stay and fight the storm, while others demanded immediate retreat, abandoning the floating city to its fate. Then something changed. The storm, raging at full force, began to recede. Its winds softened, and the skies cleared, revealing a strange glow emanating from its core. Against the backdrop of Venus's golden clouds, a colossal shape emerged, a towering, crystalline structure that radiated an almost hypnotic light. It was as if the storm had been a curtain drawn back to unveil this hidden monument. As the city's inhabitants gazed in awe and fear, a new signal burst forth, stronger and more direct than before. This time, there was no mistaking its intent. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. Amina's team raced to decipher the message, even as the city hung precariously on the edge of collapse. The symbols now seemed to form a command, a directive to approach the crystalline structure. But could humanity trust a force so incomprehensible? Or was this their first step toward unraveling a truth they weren't prepared to face? The crystalline structure loomed like a beacon, its surface shimmering with unearthly light. The storm had retreated, but its absence felt even more unsettling. The city floated in a fragile silence, perched precariously on the edge of understanding and annihilation. Amina and her team faced an impossible decision. The signal's directive was clear. They were meant to approach the structure. Yet, as they prepared a reconnaissance craft to descend through the thinning clouds, the risks were staggering. Every calculation suggested that if something went wrong, there would be no second chance. The city, their last refuge, would not survive another storm. With a mix of fear and resolve, Amina joined the mission team. As the craft disengaged from the city, a collective breath held steady among the inhabitants. The craft's descent through Venus's dense atmosphere was a chaotic journey. Turbulence battered the vessel, but the crystalline structure grew clearer with every passing moment. As they neared the surface, something extraordinary happened. The instruments aboard the craft, designed to withstand Venus's extreme conditions, began to behave erratically. Gravity readings fluctuated, as though the laws of physics were being rewritten. The crystalline structure pulsed with rhythmic light, each pulse accompanied by an audible hum, a sound that seemed to resonate not just in their ears, but deep within their minds. And then they saw it, an opening in the structure, vast and deliberate, as though waiting for their arrival. The craft hovered at the threshold, its crew paralyzed by a mix of awe and dread. Against every instinct to turn back, they entered. Inside, the craft's lights revealed an interior that defied comprehension. The space was vast, yet intimate, with walls that seemed to shift and adapt, reflecting back their own thoughts and emotions. Patterns of light danced across the surfaces, forming fleeting images, memories perhaps, or projections of the mind. It was as if the structure was alive, responding to their presence. And then came the realization. This was no relic of a long-lost civilization. It was a machine, a living archive, designed to preserve and transmit knowledge. But whose knowledge? And why had it summoned them now? The crew's instruments recorded bursts of data from the structure, streams of information too complex to decode in real time. Amina's heart raced as she began to piece together fragments of the message. It wasn't just an invitation. It was a warning. A chronicle of a civilization that had thrived in Venus's clouds long before humanity arrived, only to be destroyed by their own hubris. The storm, they learned, was no mere atmospheric phenomenon. It was a defense mechanism, designed to protect this structure and its secrets. And now, it was humanity's turn to face the same choice as the ancients: adapt or perish. As the craft began its ascent, the crystalline structure pulsed one last time, sending a final message that left the crew speechless. You are not the first. The craft ascended through Venus's thick clouds, carrying its shaken crew back to the fragile safety of the floating city. Amina clutched the recording device that held the crystalline structure's final message, its chilling implication echoing in her mind. Humanity was not the first species to inhabit Venus's clouds, nor the first to unravel the secrets of the crystalline structure. But if they were not the first, what had happened to those who came before? As the craft docked, the city's inhabitants awaited news, their collective hope and fear palpable. Amina's report confirmed their worst fears. The storm was not just a natural force, it was a deliberate creation, designed to wipe out civilizations that posed a threat to the balance of Venus's ecosystem. The message from the structure was both a warning and a test. Adapt to coexist with the planet's natural forces, or face extinction. The revelations tore through the city like a shockwave. Political factions erupted into chaos, each with its own interpretation of the structure's message. Others argued for immediate evacuation, abandoning the city and seeking a new refuge among the stars. Others believed the structure held the key to mastering Venus's environment, urging deeper exploration despite the risks. And then there were those who saw the storm not as an enemy, but as a guide, a force meant to teach humanity the limits of their arrogance. Amid the chaos, Amina wrestled with the deeper truth embedded in the structure's message. The civilizations before them had not perished from a lack of technology or knowledge. They had been undone by their refusal to change. They had ignored the delicate balance of the planet's ecosystem, imposing their will until the storm erased them. If humanity followed the same path, the outcome would be no different. But time was running out. The storm, temporarily subdued, began to stir once more. Its movements were precise, deliberate, as if reacting to the city's refusal to heed the warning. The anti-gravity systems strained against the increasing turbulence, their limits tested with every gust. Desperation grew. Could they negotiate with the forces that govern the storm? Or was survival only possible through surrendering to the planet's will? And what if humanity's survival wasn't the storm's priority at all? Amina proposed a radical plan, to use the knowledge from the crystalline structure to modify the city's systems, aligning them with the natural patterns of Venus's atmosphere. The proposal was met with fierce resistance. The modifications required shutting down parts of the city, leaving entire sections vulnerable to the storm. It was a gamble that could either save their fragile existence or hasten their destruction. As the storm's first violent waves lashed against the city, the decision was made. The city's engineers worked tirelessly, recalibrating the systems to harmonize with the planet's rhythms. Lights dimmed, platforms groaned, and entire districts went dark as power was redirected to the new systems. The city held its breath. And then, a miracle. The storm shifted, its violent winds softening as the city's systems synced with Venus's natural forces. The city no longer fought against the storm. It flowed with it, rising and falling in unison with the turbulent clouds. For the first time in years, there was calm. Yet, even as the city stabilized, the final message from the crystalline structure remained a haunting echo. You are not the first. The question lingered. If humanity was to survive, what sacrifices would they have to make to ensure they weren't the last? In the wake of the storm's retreat, the city floated in an uneasy calm. The engineers' gamble had paid off. Humanity had learned to harmonize with Venus's tempestuous rhythms. The skies, once filled with chaos, now seemed almost serene. The city's movements, a dance in tandem with the planet's atmospheric currents. But the cost of survival weighed heavily. Entire districts lay in ruins. Power reserves were critically depleted, and the population was fractured, divided between those who believed they had conquered Venus and those who believed they had only delayed the inevitable. Amina stood on the observation deck, gazing at the horizon where the crystalline structure's faint glow still pulsed like a distant heartbeat. The data they had retrieved from the probe and the modifications to the city's systems offered valuable insights, but they also raised more questions. The structure's message was clear. Humanity's future depended on its ability to coexist, not dominate. But was coexistence enough? Or would the planet's hidden forces eventually demand more? The answers were as elusive as Venus's dense clouds. The research team continued to decode the fragmented data, uncovering snippets of the ancient civilization's history. They had built their own floating cities, much like humanity's. They, too, had tried to bend the planet's forces to their will, and they had failed, leaving behind only the crystalline structure as a warning, or perhaps as a guide. For the survivors of the storm, life carried on with a new, fragile hope. The storm's reprieve offered a chance to rebuild, but the city was now a place of wary vigilance. The storm's movements were unpredictable, its behavior a constant reminder of humanity's precarious position. The crystalline structure, though silent now, loomed as an ever-present symbol of the choices they had made, and the ones they had yet to face. Amina's reflections turned to the structure's parting message. "You are not the first." The weight of those words was undeniable. The civilizations before them had fallen not because they lacked knowledge, but because they refused to adapt. Now, humanity stood at a crossroads, tasked with not only surviving, but also preserving the delicate balance they had so recklessly disrupted. As the city drifted through the golden haze of Venus's clouds, one question remained unanswered. What had the crystalline structure seen in humanity that led it to issue an invitation instead of an eradication? Was it hope, or was it a test? A final chance to prove that this time, things could be different. Yet one thing was certain. The storm would come again, and when it did, their secrets tightly, their depths a labyrinth of unanswered questions and hidden truths. Yet one thing was certain. The storm would come again, and when it did, humanity would either rise to meet its challenge or be swept away like those before them. And if you found this story compelling, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to explore more thought-provoking content. Your journey into the extraordinary is just beginning.